She was just fixing a Humvee on a dusty military base, unnoticed by most. Quiet, focused, blending in like any mechanic would. But then a general walked by, caught sight of the tattoo on her arm, and froze. That tattoo wasn't just ink. It was a secret. A story of courage few could believe. In that instant, everything changed. What no one knew was that this quiet woman carried a past that could shatter assumptions and rewrite respect. She knelt beside the Humvee in the unforgiving heat, one knee in the dirt, both hands deep in the engine bay. The vehicle had been towed in an hour earlier, its front end caked in mud, its hood warped just enough to refuse closing. Sand clung to the chassis like old regrets, one more broken machine in a long line of forgotten things. But to her, it was a quiet challenge, not a burden, not a job, just something to fix. No one was watching her. That was the point. She wasn't in uniform, not officially, just coveralls with no patch, no name, sleeves rolled tight and skin darkened by sun and time. A few soldiers had passed her without a word. One tossed a glance, registered her presence, and moved on. To them, she was probably a civilian contractor, background noise in a place built on rank, volume, and movement. She reached into the open hood, adjusted the alignment bracket with slow precision, then leaned back. Her boots crunched softly as she stood. The wrench dangled from her right hand, and her left instinctively went to wipe sweat from her temple. That's when it showed. The tattoo. Black ink curved over the left side of her neck, just under the jawline. Not decorative, not recent, faded by years and weather. A single hooked wing wrapped around a downward-pointing blade. It wasn't flashy, but it wasn't forgettable. And General Marcus Holden had not forgotten. He was mid-conversation when he saw her, halfway across the compound, heading toward a logistics tent flanked by two aides. His stride halted, words caught in his throat. He took one step closer, then stopped cold. It wasn't her face that did it, not her posture, not even her eyes, which hadn't turned his way. It was the mark. That symbol had once been burned into the corner of a briefing file he wasn't supposed to keep. A unit name he'd been ordered not to say. A signature from a time when rules bent and lines disappeared in the name of quiet victories. His aides noticed the pause. One of them spoke, "Sir," but the general raised a hand, still watching her. She was adjusting the hood now, unaware, focused, efficient. She hadn't seen him, and then she did. She looked up, not startled, just aware. Their eyes met, and for a fraction of a second, the air around them seemed to flatten. Not because he was a general, but because she wasn't supposed to exist. He didn't speak, didn't move. He stared at her neck, at the ink, at the truth crawling back from a sealed folder into living daylight. She held his gaze, calm, silent, letting him be the one to break. He turned suddenly, without another word, and walked off, his aides scrambling to keep pace. And around her, nothing had changed. The base kept moving. Engines roared, boots stomped, radios cracked. But something had shifted because a general had stopped. A general had stared, and a general had walked away shaken. And for the first time since she arrived, people started to notice the woman fixing the Humvee. The moment passed quickly, a glance, a reaction, then back to business. Engines roared again, voices rose, orders barked across the yard. The heat remained dry and unmoving, pressing into every surface like it had something to prove. She was still at the Humvee, tightening a bracket, wiping grit from the bolts with precision, as if nothing had happened. No one said her name, most still didn't know it. To them she was just the quiet woman near the fence line, always working on the same battered Humvee, not assigned, not supervised, just there. And that was exactly how she wanted it. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't ask for parts. She found them. She didn't wait for permission, she got results. Most soldiers passed her like you pass a trash can or a tire pile. Background. She let them. Fewer eyes meant fewer questions. Fewer questions meant safety. But that morning, something shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, just a ripple. Quiet, like everything else about her. Corporal Matthews, who normally spat near her boots when passing, walked by in silence, didn't say a word, didn't look at her directly, but his shoulders were tenser than usual. A younger tech, loud and overeager, approached hesitantly. He fumbled with a wrench, looking for an excuse to stand close. "Need a hand with that tensioner?" he mumbled. She didn't answer, just looked at him, calm, expressionless. No hostility, just enough eye contact to make him feel like a child. He blinked, nodded to himself, and backed away like he'd entered the wrong room. It always went like that. She wasn't intimidating by size or tone or rank. She didn't need to be. There was something older in her silence, something heavier. She had learned a long time ago that visibility was danger, that recognition meant exposure, and exposure meant vulnerability. She had spent years being invisible, and she was good at it, until now. The Humvee rumbled softly under her, engine smooth, idle, steady. The machine was alive again, patched and rebuilt with care. No one asked for it. She didn't do it for credit, didn't do it for thanks. She did it because broken things deserved a chance to work again, even if no one else believed that. She leaned against the hood for a second, breathing slow. The heat soaked into her spine, but she didn't flinch. She didn't move. The general had seen the tattoo. That alone was enough to crack the wall she'd spent years building. She hadn't wanted that, hadn't planned for it, but the way he stopped, the way his face shifted, told her everything she needed to know. He recognized it. He wasn't confused. He remembered it. And he walked away, not in shock, not in shame, in silence, because some tattoos don't mean rebellion. Some mean survival. Some mean, I was there when the world ended, and I came back anyway. The general knew, and the others, they would begin to wonder. Why had he stopped? Why had he looked at her like that? Why did the woman fixing the Humvee suddenly matter? And she knew that once the question started, the silence wouldn't last much longer. She didn't sleep that night. She rarely did. The cot in the corner of the prefab room was there for formality more than comfort. Instead, she sat on the metal crate by the window, boots unlaced, tank top still streaked with grease, watching the lights across the compound flicker against the sand-blown dark. Her hands were motionless, resting on her thighs, but her mind wasn't still, not anymore. She had felt it coming. Not the general, that had been chance, but something, the shift, the fracture in her silence. You don't spend years erasing yourself without sensing when the eraser begins to fade. Something always bleeds through. The tattoo, that's where it started. Not the image, but the memory it held. It hadn't been her idea to get it. It had been a decision made in a locked room with 4 other women and 1 man who never spoke above a whisper. No names, no rank, no cameras. Just a flame, a needle, and the promise. If you get caught, no one's coming. If you succeed, no one will know. She took the deal without hesitation. The mission that followed wasn't on record. No medals, no debrief, just terrain maps with names scratched out and coordinates that didn't exist. Deep valley, foreign soil, a compound buried in rock and silence, held by men who had names but didn't use them. The op had gone clean for 17 hours. Then the blackout hit. Radio down, support vanished. The evac team never reached the ridge. What happened in the next 48 hours didn't belong in any report. It belonged to them, the 6 who went in and the 3 who came back. 2 never made it to the extraction point. 1 died 20 meters from the LZ. She was the only one who didn't bleed, not physically, but something in her snapped in that silence, and she never let it reconnect. They'd offered her reassignment. She declined. They offered her a quiet discharge. She accepted. But the tattoo stayed. It wasn't pride. It was a scar in ink. And now the general had seen it. She remembered him, not his face, but his voice. He had been briefed before the mission, not in the room, but somewhere close. She remembered his tone, clipped, hesitant, asking if the risk was worth it. And someone had said, "That's what the 6 are for." He hadn't answered. Now he had seen one of the 6,